female founders team. We did have a fourth, our graduate research assistant, Amanda Grupp, who unfortunately graduated. I mean, fortunately for her, right? Unfortunately for us. But the three of us have been working on our female founders program now for not even a year. I guess we started last November, really. Was it November? When was it?
November.
October? Something like that.
It was last
November.
fall.
Yeah. So it hasn't even been a year. It feels longer than that. But we've already run through a couple iterations of this program. And we are very excited to be running this program. And we're going to tell you a little bit more about it right now. So the kind of the why behind it is Melissa and Leah and myself started to realize that there was kind of a big gap. You know, we run these startup programs for our startup teams out of Georgia Tech and in the community and across the South. And we kept noticing a gap that there's a lot of female researchers on campus at Georgia Tech, but maybe not as many of them were coming through our programs, and we were wondering why that might be. And so we started to do a little bit of research ourselves into this idea, and in order to build the case for why we should have a female founders program. And the reality is that there is a bit of a gap. It's not just within our accelerator, within our startup programs, but generally in the entrepreneurial ecosystems, there tends to be a bit of a gap for female founders. And part of that has to do with investment, right? So there's this sort of gap in investment. Even though women-led companies tend to outperform male-founded companies. And so we were wondering why that might be. And we dug a little bit further into our research, we started to come to this conclusion that a lot of it has to do with the network. A lot of it has to do with the fact that investors tend to get connected to people that they know, people that they have already been a part of their network, and that sort of snowballs a bit. And so if there's not like-minded, liked experienced investors, then there might not be female entrepreneurs that are getting invested in. And so we wanted to create this, not just this program for our female entrepreneurs on campus, and also in the Atlanta community, but we also wanted to embrace this idea that creating an environment where you actually see and hear from and connect with and build relationships with other individuals that have similar experiences to you can be very powerful. And it can really create a community that you can latch onto and hopefully leverage through your startup journey, and through your career and through any kind of professional evolution that you might be going through. And so we wanted to begin this program with this idea of building community and this idea of allowing our startup teams to connect with one another and with other successful female founders. So a little bit of the what behind it is that we started off not knowing how it was going to go. It ended up being there ended up being a pretty high demand for this. So this idea of a startup accelerator coached by women, taught by women, for women founders, with female founder success story speakers coming in and sharing their stories of how they got there. We weren't quite sure how it was going to go, but there was a high demand, and we started off with this intro course, which was really about teaching lean startup and teaching this idea of leveraging customer discovery to really hone in on your startup concept, and ensure that you had a market. In the intro course, it was really light on the doing, so we didn't expect a lot from our teams as far as going out and doing some customer discovery. Rather, we were just trying to provide an intro to them, and this was last fall, like we said, was our first program. From there, we realized that we wanted to, we actually asked our teams what they wanted, and they did want to continue. So we went ahead and made a more in-depth program where they would have an opportunity to go out and do more customer discovery for their startups and get a lot more one-on-one coaching for their particular ideas. And so we've now run this intro course successfully twice, and the phase 2, we've done that once. We'll be running it again this summer, and we'll be running the intro course again in the fall. So we'll just keep rolling through these 2 phases with our groups and our cohorts. And so far it's been going very well. We've seen quite a few of our teams already find a lot of success as they've moved on to next stages of their journey. I know there's some of the people on the call. We see some folks that are in our CreateX program this summer. We had some of our teams join us for a podcast with the American Cancer Society. We have seen some of them actually who have graduated Georgia Tech or graduated from their respective universities actually move forward into seeking investment, and we've seen some success there as well. So we're very excited about this program. Now, I want to skip through this a little bit. So again, it's female founders or female co-founded teams. Men are, of course, welcome to the program as well, but we're looking for those startup teams that are really run by women. And again, it's teaching that lean startup methodology, teaching the importance of doing customer discovery to ensure you have a market, tends to be the focus of these two programs. Now, one thing I want to point out is that we started this off as a fully virtual thing because of COVID, and we've very recently had to start to make that decision of whether to keep it virtual. For the time being, we want to keep it virtual because we've been able to reach a much broader audience geographically, and we want to continue to reach this broader audience. So we do want to keep it virtual. But one thing that we noticed has been missing, right, is that community building piece. So while we have been able to build some community in the programs, there's a certain element that's missing by not doing things in person. And that's really what's inspired us to kick off this speaker series and provide another way for our teams to continue to engage, to continue to get lessons learned from key female founder success stories, and also from entrepreneurial topical experts. So in this speaker series on a monthly basis, we'll invite female founders. We will also invite people we'll bring in women who are experts in various fields related to entrepreneurship, we will bring in an IP attorney. We will bring in some folks that have a consulting business on helping startup teams actually form their teams. So how do you look for that co-founder or that essential team member as you're getting your startup going? So we'll be bringing in those types of experts throughout this speaker series as well. I'm very much looking forward to this. We're going to hold it on a monthly basis as long as there's interest. And so with that, let me just kind of say this is our inaugural speaker series. We're very, very excited about it. We're excited to have Rebecca Dixon here with us, and she was actually brought to us by our missing fourth member, our GRA, Amanda Krupp. Rebecca got a chance to speak with some folks at Scheller, and Amanda, through that, connected us to her. And we're very excited to hear her story today. And I don't want to take away the stage from her too much. I'm going to let her introduce herself more, but she is our inaugural speaker for the speaker series. And we're excited to have you all here today to listen to her story. We're going to encourage you guys to drop questions into chat. Leah and I can, if there are questions that are connected to what Rebecca's talking to in that moment, we will find a good time, an appropriate time to ask them. And we will also have some Q&A at the end. So please feel free to drop your questions into chat, and we can call on you if we need to get some more insight into your question. And yeah, we're very much looking forward to kicking us off. So let me stop sharing, and I can pass it over to Rebecca right now and let her introduce herself. All right, Rebecca, welcome, welcome. Let's see, I think you might be on mute.
There we go.
There we go.
Sorry. Over a year into COVID, and I'm still unmuted sometimes.
It happens.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here for so many reasons. As I will tell you the story about the gameHERs in a moment, but I am one of 4 co-founders on our co-founding team. We're all women, so this is a really perfect place for me to be meeting all of you. I also have a very special connection to Georgia Tech. My dad, who I think might be the only man here, but he is here, is a Georgia Tech grad. He went to both undergrad and graduate school at Georgia Tech. He's super involved still. We grew up singing I'm a Ramblin' Wreck from Georgia Tech, and he recently led the annual campaign. So Georgia Tech has been a big part of my life forever. And so this is just really special for me to be here. My name is Rebecca Dixon. I have recently co-founded the gameHERs, and I'm really excited to tell you about our story. I think I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. I'm going to give you a version of our basically our pitch, kind of just telling you about the company. Definitely feel free to interrupt with questions in the chat. I also am fine to just go through the whole thing and you can ask after. Either one works for me, and feel free to interrupt me if that makes sense too. So let's just make sure it's shared correctly. Um,
Yeah, and if you haven't already figured out, we are very active in chat. So any questions that you have, feel free to drop them in there so that you don't forget them, so that we can catch up with Rebecca.
and I'm realizing right now that with my screen shared, I don't think I can see the
You
chat.
can
So
see the chat. So
yeah.
Rebecca, would
So
you like to be interrupted, or would you
it,
like us to save questions to the end?
I'm flexible. What did I plan on going to the end? But if there's something super relevant, that's fine too.
Sure. Yeah, just drop your questions in chat, everyone, so you don't forget them, and we'll catch them at the end. Thank you.
All right. So since launching in March of 2020, the gameHERs has become the largest social networking and media platform for women who game in North America. And at the very bottom line, our mission is to advance the role and the voice and the image and the power of all gameHERs. We certainly welcome everyone who values this mission, and we do have a lot of very supportive men in our community. And I think before I introduce the gameHERs, as a company, I'll just tell you a little bit about our team. So like I mentioned, I have three co-founders. Three of the four of us, Laura, Heather, and I, actually had a company before this. We had a company in the parenting world. It was called Mommy Bites. Laura founded it in 2006. We're based in New York, and she had just had a baby. Found it very hard to meet other parents. For those of you who are parents in the room, you're probably wondering how that was possible. But as recently as 2006, that was before most social networks were around and the world wasn't digital like it is now. So she created Mommy Bites initially, and then Heather and I joined her as a way to meet new parents. It was very grassroots. It grew to become digital. We built our presence on, all the relevant social networks at the time. We learned a ton about community building and community growth and community engagement. We created a matchmaking platform for parents and caregivers. And we were able to sell that company in 2016 to a media company in New York City. So at that time, all of us were doing some consulting. We love being entrepreneurs. We love initiatives around women. And we found ourselves with some adjacencies to the gaming industry. From my perspective, my dad and my brother are actually involved in the ownership team of an esports team, Envy. So that gave me kind of a front row seat to the gaming industry, which just blew me away with its size and impact, which I'll get into in our presentation. My co-founder, Heather, went from parenting to toys, and she was doing some toy design in the video gaming industry. So once we found out and learned about the gaming industry, that led us to where we are today. And we partnered up with Verta, who has a very long career in diversity, equity, and inclusion. She's worked with the Gates Foundation and the New York City Board of Ed. And so, when you start talking about women in gaming, the conversation very quickly also includes diversity, equity, and inclusion, because marginalized communities have a lot of the same, problems that women have. So we have an incredible advisory board as well that you can see here. And with that, I think I am going to go ahead and start telling you about the company. So as you may or may not know, there are 2.7 billion gamers in the world. And if you can believe it, half of them are women. The majority of women who game experience harassment and hate and toxicity while gaming simply for being women. Because of this, a lot of women gamers long for an easy and a safe way to find other women who game, to play with and connect. Up until the gameHERs, there had been no quick and easy way to do this. So we decided to create one. Like I said, we have a lot of male supporters and male allies. I think, as you'll hear, there's no way to do this without the supporters and the allies. And we also did a lot of research at that time, and we were kind of wondering, is anybody addressing this initiative? What we found is that it was being addressed. It was being addressed by a lot of nonprofits, and they were doing things like scholarships and mentorships. It was also being addressed by a lot of the senior women who were in the gaming industry, because you'll find that there's a big overlap in women who game and women who would like to work in the gaming industry. So a lot of the women who had managed to get in the industry and progress to senior positions were also discussing the problem, but what we did not find is what became our solution. So with our first of its kind women-led game connection web and mobile app, coupled with our empowering and influential and diverse community, the gameHERs is really the first company to enable women to easily and safely find other women to game with and socialize with. We've decided to launch our company as a for-profit company because, like I said, there were nonprofits and there were individuals addressing it, but we felt like if we could create a media company to amplify the conversation and also to employ women, that we would have a bigger impact. So to that end, in order to monetize the company, we have a number of revenue streams, primarily our app, which I just mentioned. That's going to be sort of our shorter term focus. It's going to be free, but have subscription-based upgrades, as well as in-app purchases based on a digital currency that is already very popular in the gaming community, so women who game will be used to that. The app is certainly our North Star, as they say, but we're also going to have the revenue streams of advertising and merchandise, since our brand has really resonated with gamers and with brands. And we also have found a lot of potential long-term future and market research and data. So the market size of the gaming industry is astronomical. According to the latest figures, the video game business is larger than the movie and the music industries combined. In the wake of COVID, the market is witnessing a huge uptick in downloads, time spent gaming, and engagement. And even as we come out of COVID, the industry experts do not expect that to go down. And so, we felt like the timing was right, the market size was huge, and that we'd figured out a way to solve a really unique problem. So we started the gameHERs because ethically it felt like the right thing to do. And as I'm sure all of you know, having an ethically conscious company is always good for business. So I mentioned our revenue model before. Here it is: in-app purchases, advertising, merchandise, licensing, sponsored events, and then that sort of data piece is kind of longer term. We don't have that in our model right now, but we continue to believe that will be a pretty big deal. So our reputation and our reach and our influence that we've gotten over the past even 14 months, I actually don't think I mentioned the date that we launched. We launched on March 2nd, so we launched right along with COVID. It turned out to be a pretty great time to launch a company, actually, in the gaming industry because everybody was home. And so the reputation that we have been able to create has allowed us already to monetize our brand. For the digital and live events that we host, most importantly, the gameHERs Awards, which I'm going to tell you about in a little bit, we have sponsorships with leading esports teams, with endemic gear brands, and also brands in the luxury, beauty, and cosmetics categories. Just last month, we actually launched our collegiate division, because if you are going to focus on moving the needle for women in gaming, you have got to focus on collegiate. It's one of the reasons I got here, by doing a lot of networking in the collegiate world. And our collegiate division, we launched with partners from Lenovo, from Twitch Student, DePaul University was our partner pilot program, and eFuse gaming platform. We're also in communications with one of the largest esports fashion companies to co-launch a line of exclusive gameHERs merch. And we're finalizing deals with a national beverage company to launch with our app. So we're really excited about all this. Somebody in one of our pitches recently called this slide the NASCAR slide, because we put all the logos on it. But I think with a brand like ours, brand recognition is important. And so we're really excited that this momentum and desire to align with our brand has continued to grow. And we fully expected that path to continue into 2021, 2022, and beyond. So the gameHERs Awards. The gameHERs Awards, that we hosted them in 2020, and they're very relevant because they're what put us on the map. It's a model that we learned in our first company, and we created. They basically started as a lead generation tool, which worked, and they ended up being something that gave us that brand recognition. We wanted to honor and celebrate women in the gaming industry, and this is the first awards created by women for women. Last year, it was an 8-week extravaganza. This year, it is actually going to be a 16-week extravaganza from the nomination period to the voting to the finale. And within 3 days last year, we had 600 nominations. We ended up with 75,000 votes and 170,000 views on Twitch. We were featured on the front page, and it was an overwhelming response from the community. One of the most exciting parts for us is that the winners were from all over the world. A lot of the nominees were either streamers or people in the industry, or we had 25 different categories, and women were so excited to have this opportunity to honor each other that they really came out and voted for each other. So it showed us that the idea we were hoping would work was working. So our app, where we exist now, is on all of our different social platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Discord. Our email list is pretty robust as well. But the biggest theme from our community is wanting an easy way to find other women to game with and socialize with. So the gameHERs app, which is going to be launching in beta in August and publicly in October, is being built for that exact purpose. It's going to be the go-to place for women who game in real time to game with and socialize with. Group chats, private messaging, events, basically everything we do now, ultimately, anywhere, is going to be on our app. So what makes our app different than other apps that are out there for gaming and for connecting is that it is targeted specifically for women. It is designed by women. And we infused our unique gameHERs values, vibe, and beautiful branding throughout a user-friendly, authentic, safe, and positive experience. Our app is being created under the leadership of our product manager, Todd Zander. He's a digital media and mobile health executive, and he has a lot of experience in building mobile and web businesses. He built Discovery Channel, WebMD, and Healthline. So we don't have an internal CTO. None of us are tech people, and we felt like it was really important to work with somebody who was super qualified as we launched the first version of our app. So in order to get the word out there, other than the people who we currently have that will filter onto the app, we are going to work with macro and micro influencers by formulating strategic campaigns with them to help bring awareness to our app to their own loyal and engaged communities. We've already worked with macro and micro influencers. We did for our awards and just for a number of other unique content creation pieces that we've had on our various platforms. The macro influencers are great. The micro actually are even more successful for us. And this is just another kind of group of supporters we have that we call them celebrities at the top. They're celebrities in the gaming world. These are voice actors and actresses who are big supporters of ours and will also help us launch the app. So the monetization strategy is pretty straightforward. We'll have in-app purchases, and over time we'll have a subscription. It will always have a free option for sure, which is important for us because, like I mentioned earlier, collegiate is a big part of our community, and we want everyone to be able to use the app for free. But gamers are very, very used to paying for things in game and in apps. So we actually did a survey before we started doing our app and had 500 community members respond, and over half of them said they would be open to paying for virtual gifts and in-app purchases. So the typical percentage for that is under 5%, and we had over 50. So we were pretty excited about that. Where we are now in terms of reach, we have 130,000 community members, which is a number that we're pretty happy with after 15 months. It's across all of our platforms. And we have built that community through relationships with, like I said, the micro influencers, and also through our sponsored events. So who is a gamer? A gamer is, anything from a casual gamer, a streamer, a cosplayer, college students. But I mentioned this earlier, and I want to mention it again. DEI is a big part of our company. Diversity and equity and inclusion is in the DNA of our company. We are in the middle of a capital raise right now, and we're dedicating 7 to 10% of that raise to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We feel pretty strongly that if we don't focus on those initiatives right from the launch of our company, both actually internally and externally, that we can't be successful. And There's a lot of research out there showing that companies in the top quartile for racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have better financial returns than their non-D&I competitors. So that is just another business reason to do that. And I will wrap up by sharing with you that in gaming, there's a common phrase in gaming called leveling up. And leveling up usually entails unlocking new abilities and skills, and therefore having access to a new area in the game. So we are really, really excited at the gameHERs. We feel like now is the time to level up to ensure that all women feel safe and have fair access to all places in the gaming space. Thank you so much. And I saw some, I actually was able to see some of the chat, so I would be happy to answer any questions. Let me stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was really great. It was excellent to hear your story and to hear about the company and your goals. I know we have one question from Melissa I want to get to in chat, but I have a quick question for you because you just touched on this. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the dedication to DEI and
Sure.
yeah, and what if you guys have kind of like the tactical things you're hoping to do to stay in line with that goal?
Yeah, absolutely. So we decided that the way to focus on it from the beginning was to first focus internally. So and this is atypical, we hired and we have an HR director, and our HR director, it focuses on both general HR in terms of things like employee handbooks and just typical onboarding things, and also making sure that we focus on DEI. We have team meetings discussing DEI topics. We really make sure that our employees, know that it is something top of mind. We think about DEI when we're hiring. Our team is very diverse, and we make it a point to be. That said, in terms of also, we don't always do everything right, and we know our team knows that our doors are open and that it's a goal of ours to make sure that everybody feels like the gameHERs, as a company, is a safe and inclusive place to work. And if there are any, issues, that they can come to us. On an external, how we focus on it externally, we talk about it all the time. We think about diversity when we are putting together panels and making sure that we are reflecting diversity. If we're getting a group of women to talk about collegiate esports, we always say, just because we're women that's not diverse. That's we're half the world. So that's just what it is. And then we need to kind of go beyond that. We're working with colleges to try to get women more access to esports scholarships. So I didn't get too much into esports specifically. So for those of you who are not familiar, there are scholarships for video gamers, and women really aren't getting them, and diverse women particularly are not getting them. So that's something we talk a lot about. We work with a lot of organizations who have similar missions to us, but who are specifically focused on DEI. There are a couple specifically in the college space. And we also work with brands. It's something we think about with brands. There are some brands that are really focused on it, and there are others that are not. So we have that conversation early on with any of our sort of strategic partners in our brands.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. That's really great to hear the actual tactical actions that you guys are going to be taking related to DEI. And it sounds like it's really central to what you're trying to do. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
Yeah. You want to hop into some questions from chat?
Oh, yeah. Here, I can actually just look in the chat myself. Let's see.
Melissa can kick off her question.
Hey, Lily.
Hey, yeah. So you mentioned during part of it that you had a very certain aesthetic, right, with your company, and I'm just wondering, how did you figure out what that aesthetic needed to be? Like, where did you go for that information, and how did you know that it was resonating with your customer base? Can you talk us through that a little bit?
Yes. So my co-founder Laura created our logo, and we did not know at first that it would resonate. What the logo is, there are certain throwbacks in our logo. I would be happy to share with you. Actually, off the top of my head, I don't know all of the different pieces of it, but they they are throwbacks to the early days of gaming and the first women who gamed and the colors of the 70s and 80s. How we knew it resonated, and this is sort of a tactic we use in every decision we make, including our app and including what to program, is we looked back to our community. So we created the logo. We started getting, the first thing we did is create an Instagram. That was where we existed first. And the logo did resonate right away. So we were lucky with that. But then in terms of what kind of merch we put it on and who we align with, we just always look back to our community. We have a very, very active Discord. I don't know if all of you are on Discord. It is the main place that gamers connect with each other. It's not a place where women who game can find each other to connect because it's not very safe and it's also not convenient, but it is where gamers chat. The functionality of Discord is like Slack, if you have used that. And so in our Discord, which is one of, and possibly to our knowledge, might be the biggest all women Discord for gamers that's not connected to like one game, our Discord is super, super active. So we can just throw questions in our Discord and say, what do you think of this? What do you like about this? So an example of that is we hosted a professional boot camp in March geared towards college students and or young professionals. And the reason we hosted that is because we started noticing in our Discord, there were so many discussions about how do you get a job in the gaming industry? So we thought, there aren't enough women in the gaming industry yet, but there are women in the gaming industry. There are a lot of really incredible ones. And the thing about the ones who are there is they're very incentivized to get more women there. So they're very happy for pretty much across the board to share their time and their expertise. I mean, our boot camp was incredible. It had 30 women willing to give free mentor hours one-on-one. You could just sign up, first come, first serve, for that one-on-one, everything from creating a LinkedIn profile to how to build your brand as a streamer. And then there were lots of talks and things like that. But the way that we got to the idea of hosting the bootcamp in the first place was just by monitoring the chat and participating in the chat in our Discord. So that is really how we figured out what was resonating, about our brand in general early on. And I think the conversation around women in gaming, I think I touched on this in my talk. We kind of couldn't believe that there wasn't a company like ours already. And so the minute that we started talking about it, it really resonated. Now, we always do want to say, because we are not endemic to the gaming industry, and we were not the first people to have this conversation. So how we describe ourselves often is like a hub for all of the great things going on in gaming that benefit women. So that, there were things over here, there were things over here, there was a mentorship, there was someone trying to give somebody a scholarship, there was an article, and now it's like all here.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rebecca. I think that the biggest takeaway I hear, and that speaks so much into what we do at VentureLab, is this idea that you continually engage with your customer, right?
Always.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would be safe to say you would not sit back at any point and go, we got this figured out, we don't need to engage anymore. Yeah. It's a constant learning. So thank you. That's such an important lesson for all of us.
I think it is, especially as women, and it's really the expertise that my team had from our first company with our parenting community. And it's why I think the gaming industry has been very open and receptive to us. We were worried at first. Now, I don't know if worried is the right word, but we were wondering if we would get pushback, like, well, you're not real gamers. I mean, I certainly do game. I have 2 young daughters. I think you probably just heard one of them. And we play Among Us together and whatever. But none of us come from a traditional sort of hardcore gamer background, but we are community builders. And I think that as women founders, we really all have to be community builders. It's the way to build a community, is to listen to your community.
Right. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm going to go to chat. We have another question in regards to your tech personnel. Did you bring them in as a consultant, or will be paid on the back end with profit sharing over a period of time?
That's a great question. So this is an example of something we learned along the way. We didn't bring in a tech consultant at first. We hired an app development company who we are very happy with. And we realized in the process, while we don't have enough for a CTO to do yet, we don't need one yet, but we will need one after we get a little bit further down the road. We realized we do need somebody who really understands our team, who also understands, product development. So right now, that person is an independent consultant, and as the app launches, we'll probably change that structure. Whether or not that specific person becomes a CTO or becomes, equity owner, I'm not sure yet, but we have actually everybody who works for us at this point is an independent contractor or, consultant. And then we will probably, just because of where we are in the life cycle of our company, we'll probably start having employees and potentially, be giving out equity in the next 6 to 12 months.
Rebecca, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead. Yes, who was that?
Yeah, just to piggyback on that. Hi, this is Rama. And Rebecca, very impressive numbers, like within 15 months, I think you guys went up to 130K. And the brands you're partnering with, that's huge. So I actually took a snapshot of it. So congratulations.
Thank you.
I do want to understand, it seemed like a very brave move to launch a company, especially a gaming one, without having a tech person in your founders, right? In your group of founders. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how did you guys move around?
Sure.
Overcome that?
So yeah, it's actually a pretty simple answer. We didn't expect to be a tech company. We thought we were a media company when we launched. And our initial goal was to be a media platform and a community for women who game. But when I say media platform, just amplifying and celebrating women in gaming. It was only in existing for about 6 months that we consistently got the feedback that there was need for an easy and safe way for women who game to connect. What they were doing, again, I'm not sure if a lot of you or any of you are gamers, but so you can certainly weigh in on this. But if you are somebody looking to find someone else to game, the most typical ways that we heard they were doing it up to now is maybe throwing a Hail Mary out on Twitter, or trying to find a friend of a friend, or going in Discord. But Discord is, you're going to be in one community to see if you can find someone. Also, the chances that somebody who plays your game at your level and your time zone wants to play right now, it was just complicated. So we did not expect to be a tech company. Once we started talking about, well, now we have this community, should we create an app? We started talking to app companies. And then once we started developing, our first iteration of our app, we realized, like I said, we need a little bit more expertise than this. We hired a product. We were really lucky to get our product manager, because he's got a lot of expertise in women communities. And like I mentioned, WebMD and Discovery. And so he's perfect for right now, because he can help us do A and B testing and figuring out all the, all of the questions that we didn't know we needed to be thinking about. But that's the answer. Yeah.
That helps. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there other questions from the audience? Does anybody else want to unmute and ask a question?
I will.
Okay.
I know you had a previous company, and again, congratulations. I mean, it's pretty impressive what you've done in 15 months. I mean, for some of us that are trying to come into the business and starting off, we're like, wow, if Rebecca can do it, sure, we can do it. Whatever it takes that we need to do, we certainly will do it. But how did you go about strategizing to build up a community, even though you had done it with the parenting company, the previous one? How did you, and I know it's easy to do it with gaming, but then at the same time, it's also not easy, because you have to know where to look. How did you come up with that strategy?
So I can tell you, sorry, my computer's calling. I can tell you what we did. I don't think I mentioned this yet, to build brand recognition immediately and to meet a lot of gamers. Before we launched on March 2nd, we had been strategizing about this idea since about November of 2019. And this is another tactic for community building that we learned from our parenting company, we were able to attend 2 events before the world shut down. We are lucky. The gaming industry and the parenting industry are both industries where consumers love, whatever you want to call them, expos, conferences, events where a lot of them get together. So we attended something called PAX. For those of you who don't know it, it's similar to Comic-Con, which is a little more, has a bigger name brand, but PAX is actually like the real gaming conference where people go and, see what the new games are that are going to be launched and all that. So we went to 2 PAX events in winter of 2020. We set up a photo booth. So a photo booth is, a fun thing that people like to do at events. And you could get the photos emailed to you if you give us your email. So now we got about 5,000. There were 80,000 people at each of those PAXs, and we got about 5,000 emails at each one. So were those 5,000 from those initial PAX events our best and most engaged community members that we still have? Some of them, probably some of them not, because they just wanted to get their picture taken and get the video, and then some of them unsubscribed. But just the pure numbers, it's a numbers game. We got a lot of emails right off the bat. Then we created our Discord and had them, the ones who actually went to our Discord, that's where we really got a lot of the quality feedback. That being said, email, it's interesting. Gamers aren't big emailers, but emails are still they're such quality things to own, especially when you're trying to, in the middle of a capital raise, which we are, because you own them. It's one of the only things we own. If Instagram goes out of business, then our 35,000 Instagram followers don't mean anything. I don't think Instagram is going to go out of business, but email is kind of king or queen, as we like to say. That being said, so that was the first thing we did. If you are starting a company in an industry and you need to get people in your community, and there are events, that I would highly recommend that as a tool. The other big tool, and I mentioned this earlier, it was 6 months later, but running an awards show, it's a little bit more work than going to an event, but it grows a community itself, because we literally took this from one of our competitors in the parenting world, was called Red Tricycle. I don't know if any of you know that company. They ran the Red Tricycle Awards in parenting. And it started as the Red Tricycle Awards, where they would, they'd say best stroller or best pacifier. By the second or third year, I think they realized what a good tool it was, and they had, best parenting community, best everything. And so the reason is, if you're nominated best parenting blogger, if you get nominated for that, you want to win. So you promote it, and then all your community votes for you. So those 2 tools were the biggest ways that we grew in mass numbers, and then also micro influencers.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You got it.
Are there other questions from our audience? Does anybody want to unmute and ask a question? Okay, if not, I've got one for you, Rebecca. I'm curious, and this could be for your previous company as well, I'm just curious to understand, how do you go about, or can you talk us through your strategy or your co-founder's strategy for making decisions about when you have investors that are approaching you, or when you're releasing some equity to say a new tech personnel or something like that. So making these monetary decisions in your startup as you're going through the early stages. Can you talk us a little bit through some of that?
I can talk you a little bit through it. It's one of the things I think about every day, and I'm still learning. So I don't have experience doing it from my first company, because we bootstrapped that whole company. It was profitable from the beginning, and it was also much smaller. So it was a great experience in learning to community build. We had a matchmaking platform that was web-based, and we were able to sell it. So that has made that, the fact that we are founders who have sold a company, does make it easier to get introductions and conversations going as we're fundraising. So that's really helpful. That being said, this is our first company where we are in the middle of a formal capital raise, and we were thinking about things like equity. I think I think the number one thing I would say is you have to stay in business, right? So very shortly into our life as a company, I mentioned this, we realized we needed to develop an app, or that, that there was a desire and that we were going to. So that suddenly meant we needed a lot more money than we thought we would need. So we started talking about fundraising, and we gave up, a percentage of equity in that. We did a family and friends round last summer. We were able to also get Riot Games to give us an investment, because they were having a lot of I didn't get too into the harassment piece of the gaming industry, but it's not, it's not great. It's like a lot of industries, but it's pretty public. And there was a resurgence of the Me Too movement last June, specifically in gaming, where 168 women on one day on Twitter announced, shared stories of harassment with very senior people in the industry. A lot of people got fired, and Riot ended up committing $20 million to women and diverse founders. And we reached out to them because we qualified for it, and we got it. So that was great. And, we struggled a little bit because Riot doesn't have a great reputation in the gaming industry. But then we said, well, if we're here to try to move the needle and change the industry, and there's a company who's saying, we know we have a problem, how can you help us fix it? We actually felt like that would be a good, a good investor. And they have been a great partner, by the way. And so that's awesome. They still sometimes get bad press. They haven't fixed everything, but it's not an immediate, this problem isn't going to be fixed overnight. So in terms of actual metrics for how to decide, I think the number one thing we always keep in mind is, if we run out of cash, we'll be out of business. So we can sit here and debate forever. Is this too much equity to give away? Is this too much equity to give away? And ultimately we need cash. So sometimes we might look back at our first family and friends raise that also included Riot and say, gosh, we didn't know anything about fundraising a year ago. Did we give up too much equity? Well, no, we did not give up too much equity, because we would have gone out of business without that cash. Where we are now, as we're raising again a more significant amount, we first of all have been able to get a lot of feedback from the industry on sort of industry standards. We've talked to a lot of people about what do you usually give up? And I think somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, I just happened to see it as I was going, that I think that it was a comment saying that if you look at a lot of success, or maybe it was in the initial presentation, if you look at a lot of successful women, they always say that their kind of community got them to where they are. And I think that's what I would also say. I talk to anybody I can who I think can guide me in sort of what is normal. We participated, but I was the main point person in a women-only accelerator this past spring, which was super helpful, because I could do things like, this isn't answering a question about equity, but we had a PR company we were working with. They were trying to charge us a little more. It felt too much to me, but we did want PR. I didn't know what was normal. Like, is it normal to pay $5,000 a month for PR when you're our size? I have no idea. So I shared it with the 50 people in my accelerator, which again is sort of my community at that point. And I got a ton of feedback. I got other sample PR contracts and documents. And so I think that's the other piece of it when you're thinking, well, how much would we give a CTO when we get one? We don't need one yet. And so I haven't done a lot of research onto that yet, whether it's a 1%, a 0.5%, 2%, 3%. It depends probably on so many different factors. But I know the number one piece of, the number one tool that I will use is research among my greater network.
That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think we also obviously believe that community building is incredibly important for the success of our female founders. So it's great to hear that you seek the advice from your community, and we hope that we can instill some of that in our founders as well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, there's the community that we're building at the Gamers, for the Gamers community, but it's so important as a founder to have your community, your professional community. And I actually have had an incredible amount of success. I mean, beyond incredible, with LinkedIn. I have found that to be, as a startup founder, my number one success tool for building my community, nurturing it, and growing it. And it totally shocked me, but I'll just sort of throw that in there as another tidbit.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. Yes, we also find that maybe this isn't just a women thing, but I found that being a woman and reaching out to other women leaders, there is this sense of camaraderie in a lot of ways, and we do often support each other. And I think that, leveraging LinkedIn for some of that could be really beneficial. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, some of the best advice I've gotten is from other women founders, and they may be earlier on in their company life cycle, but just happen to have gone through something that we haven't gone through, or talking through those types of challenges are always so helpful.
And Rebecca, I think that's why we're all here today, because we're hoping that somebody on this call just heard something that they didn't even know they needed to hear, but they just heard it. And so now it's going to help them,
Well, I hope so too. And listen, it helps me to have opportunities to share our story, and even some of the questions that you ask make me, think about things in a different way. So I really just appreciate the chance to be here, and thank you for having me.
Very welcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to check if there's any other questions though from the audience before we wrap.
I have one more.
Yeah, go for it.
So Rebecca, your previous company, you said one of your friends was running it and then they pulled you in, or if it was the other way around. When you're a single person trying a startup, how do you know, and when do you know that you need to pull somebody else in?
I could tell you what happened at our other company. So my co-founder, Laura, started the company. She pulled in our co-founder, Heather, first, because Heather had some ideas. They met through a networking group, and Heather had some ideas about how to grow the business. And just like I was saying before, Laura also wanted to grow it, but needed some additional capital. So that's one reason that would be one reason to bring somebody else in if they're going to sort of co-invest with you in your own company. And then they brought me in when they realized my professional background in the corporate world, which I didn't mention, is in advertising. I did media buying and ad sales for my first 10 years of my career. They started realizing they could grow the company and monetize it through brand partnerships, but they had no idea how to do that. So that's how I came in. So I think a lot of the times you'll know because you'll realize that there's a need that you can't fill. And I also would say I've been in a couple of different accelerators and networking groups, and there are a lot of companies, of course, that are founded by one person, but 4 is a lot. We've had sometimes 4 is challenging, but I do think it is always really helpful to try to, if possible, find at least a co-founder, because it's a lot of pressure. So having somebody to talk to, I think, is helpful if you can find the right person.
Awesome. Thanks again. Yeah, thank you for that question. And thank you, Rebecca, again, for that great answer. I know we're always trying to help our teams find more team members. And on that note, I just want to thank you generally for coming and speaking to us. This was a great conversation, and we're looking forward to continuing our speaker series. Thanks for being our guinea pig and our first one out of the gate. We always
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate people joining us. For all of you that are on the call, we hope that you'll join us in July and in the subsequent months. So the next speaker session is going to be July 22nd. It'll be the same time at lunchtime, because we know we're all super busy. And we will have 3 co-founders together from a company called Thaena. So it'll be Mary Phillips, Andrea, and Piper, her 2 co-founders. And we had invited Mary because she also has a consultancy called STEMbridge that is highly focused on consulting entrepreneurs on how to form teams and how to take a good self-examination of your skills, your passions, and what you can contribute to a team, and figuring out how to bring on the right co-founders with you along the way. So we're bringing Mary in for that conversation, but also to talk about her experience as a co-founder with Thaena. So Thaena actually hired her to help them form their team, and then they ended up hiring her in as a chief strategic officer for them. So that'll be on July 22nd. We're really looking forward to that conversation. In the subsequent months, we have Carolyn Pitts coming on and talking about her company, productions.com. And then we will have in September, Sammy, and I'm going to say her last name wrong, but Sammy Hassan, who is a recently graduated student from Georgia Tech. I'm sure many of our Georgia Tech folks on the call are probably familiar with her, but she has the startup Meds here with her product B-Case, so that case on the phone for birth control. So we're looking forward to that conversation in September as well. We hope you all will join us for those subsequent series. Thank you guys again. Thank you, Rebecca, for joining us.
Thank you.
Hopefully we will talk to you sometime soon. Good luck with everything that you're doing.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck.
Bye, everybody.
See you at another talk.